There is the culture ladder in the organization, and over time, and when I compare the situation of Shell in the early 70s, you had a pathological reaction to when something went wrong, a fatality, you immediately took action and started to look around what you need to do to avoid it. Generally, this evolved through a situation of being reactive, to being calculative. We have systems in place to manage all hazards, to being proactive. We work on the problems that we still find, and generative, HSE is how we do business around here. And I would say, if I take this graph of the periods, I would say this is the pathological is the 70s of Shell. Here we have, I'd say, the 80s of Shell. Here we have the 90s of Shell, and I would say that we are just about here now. Maybe not all areas still fully generative, but it's still something that's really so ingrained in the organization. And we're looking at what's the next thing, because is this indeed sufficient in the end? You see it a bit similar here in this graph, a fragmented approach in the beginning to a systematic approach to a really a behavioral approach at the moment. And that's the crucial issue to managing safety. It has to be a behavioral approach. A shared purpose of belief, an aligned performance commitment, and an external view. Let other people from outside come in and challenge you. And then, in the end, and that's a statement I'd like to make to those cynics who always say, yes, it costs too much money and we can't afford it. Good safety management saves you money. I'll give you an example for that. When we have a fatality in a factory, and I'll take the US situation, which is a much more litigious environment than, say, Europe. When you have a fatality, you always get a court case. When you have your systems in place and you can demonstrate to the judge that you really have got a proper system in place and that management is taking care of that, and nevertheless an incident still happen, you generally don't get a fine. You get the normal arrangement of taking care of the people in an appropriate way, but you don't get a fine. When you don't have your system in place, the judges will be pretty severe with you, and it will cost you millions. And the cost of that, and I know the system is not as litigious yet in Europe. It's developing, unfortunately, more and more. And now, maybe that's a value judgment which I shouldn't make, but it is developing. And the fact of the matter is, I think that hospitals will have to take care more and more that they avoid this. And I can advise people, you can only avoid it if you make sure you have the system in place. Then you don't have to care about these cases, because you are open with the patients and their relatives if something goes wrong.